Welcome back in Solitude with myself, DJ Hero. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I process the sub bass in my tracks. If you watch the first video on my channel, you'll have the basic idea of what I'm going to do today, but I get asked regularly, how do I keep my sub bass and my kick so clear in the mix? Making bass music, it's really easy to have your track get muddy really fast, especially when there's a lot of sub-frequency activity. What I find happens generally is because you end up fighting for space and overhead, your mix down and consequently your master suffers, meaning your mix down isn't as clean and you're not able to get the master as loud as you might want it due to like distortion from battling frequencies or phasing. Now, there are a couple of quick and easy solutions. Side chaining being the main one, where you side chain your sub bass around your kick drum. However, I find that doesn't give me clean sub bass. Instead, the result I typically hear is a pumping effect on the sub, where I might want like a steady sound throughout the entire mix. If you're working with a fixed or straight beat like house music as opposed to a broken beat or a break beat, you could get a really solid result from something like Xfer's LFO tool. Their LFO plugin is fantastic, especially with that shapeable LFO form, similar to or exactly like the one that's in Xfer's Serum, right? That LFO, you just click on some spots, draw in the pattern that you want, and you get a fantastic result. I mean, it's phenomenal. I love both the LFO tool and Serum for how they handle that. But if you're working with a breakbeat, that can be difficult to dial in that shape over the course of, say, 2 bars, 4 bars, however, right, your pattern might change a bit from bar to bar, and you need it. You would need to write that out in that LFO shaper that Xfer has, and that would just get difficult. May not give you the result that you want. So what I'm going to show you today, though time-consuming and in all honesty, really tedious, is going to dramatically clean up the mix, help avoid those phasing issues, and keep that bass super clean, super clear in the mix, as well as keep the attack of the kick just as clear and prevalent in your mix. To start, I want to mention first and foremost, this technique works best if you've chosen a kick drum that is in the key of the bass line you've written. So if you haven't thought about that, maybe go back through your tune, and make sure that the kick is in fact in the right key. If it's not, find one that is. Get it set in there the way that you want it to, kind of the bass mix down, if you will, and then maybe apply this technique after that to get the best result. All right, so here's a taste of the bass line that we have going on here. Now, this is from a tune that I've just recently finished. Bass line's not overly complicated, but it does have some movement in the frequencies, so that sub bass gave me a little bit of issues. And that's the bass line. Here it is by itself. And if you listen, you'll be able to hear the subs. If you're on your phone, maybe get a good set of headphones. If you've got your monitors, you'll be able to hear it better. But here's the bass line by itself. You can see some Serum here. All it really is the pitch bend has been automated amongst a bunch of other parameters. And that's that. And then the kick loop, show you that, we have here. Now, what I've basically done is written my kick pattern out, you know, beat for beat. And then once I've got an 8-bar loop, I merge them. I went over this in another video, but basically I do that so that I can easily see where I'm at in my track as a whole. Probably doing that a bit differently than most, but it just helps me kind of keep track of everything. So let's take a look here. This is the basic beat. You'll see that that first beat is an 808 kind of driven, right? It is extended note there, and then each individual beat is just more of a shorter decay. And my bass line here, put them together just to hear them. Okay, and then if we take a look at the bass line, right now I have it split in an audio effects rack into 3 channels: the mid-high, the low, and then I have a separate one for reverb. The low one is the one we want to pay attention to, right? Right now I've got it set, a utility to set the sub to mono. I have a compressor side chaining around a separate pattern that I have up here, and then an EQ, which cutting off all the frequencies above 150 hertz. So it's really just the sub aspect of it. However, a couple of issues that I was running into, and partly what made me kind of think to do this video, was this signal chain is then running into this rack, which has an OTT, another EQ, and then it has some automation on a low-pass filter. And what was happening was every time the sidechain would trigger on the sub, that would affect how the OTT worked, what happened with the sound going through the EQ. You can actually see that I was having troubles dialing it in with this little peak right there. And then also that low pass acted a little funny, all because this would kick out the sub for that split second, ducking it around the kick. So I just wasn't pleased with the result I got there. And then also with it running through all this, I found I was getting resonance on those low end frequencies. You can almost hear it, and you can definitely see it in this sound here. Something with the way the OTT was processing that low end portion, I didn't like it. It was making me unhappy with how it was coming together in the mix. So let's show you what I've got going on here and what I'm going to do. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge my sub bass with my kick drum and get a good clean result. First step. Turn that off here. So the first step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the channel itself. I'm going to remove all of the effects because I just don't need them. And you can do that by hitting Control, delete, delete. Now I'm going to bring up Serum here. And what I want is the sub. I don't want anything else, right? So right now we have this. We've got the oscillators going to work, the filter going to work, and all the effects going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the oscillators. I'm going to turn off the filter. You'll see that the sub portion of Serum is set to direct out, so it's not being affected by any of these effects. So you don't really have to worry about any of those at all. And this is what it sounds like now. Right? And I'll stage this, turn this up just as much as possible before it starts redlining the plug-in. Perfect. Perfect. Just close that. Next step here, I'm going to freeze it. Once it's frozen, I'm going to flatten it. Boom, we have a waveform. The whole wave. All right. So that is just the sub-range, the sub-frequencies of that bass line. Easy enough, right? All right, so before I move any further, I don't need this low end and the actual top end of that bass line anymore, right? So we can cut that. And I can make sure that since we don't need any low end, I can make sure that this is cut to 150 because that's where I'm going to want it. So that's the bass line, mid and high range. Boom. So easy enough. We'll get back to that one a bit later, but we don't need the low end anymore. In fact, if you wanted to, if you needed to save some computing power, you could simply delete it out of the rack there, and there you go. But let's get back to the sub here. All right, so like I said at the intro of this video, super tedious, super time consuming. However, I have found that it provides me a fantastic result with respect to kick and sub bass being clean in the mix as a whole and keeping or clearing up as much overhead as possible for everything else. All right, so what I'm going to do next, I'm going to pull this up to my kick here and take a look, kind of zoom in, and we're just going to go through it. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to stretch this out a little bit so I can have a clearer waveform. I want to make sure that the waveform of my sub is at the same level as the waveform of my kick here. Not worried about the attack so much, but you can see this sub aspect of the kick, right? The easy way to do that is just kind of drag it over it and take a look. Maybe that was too much. Let's do like that. So it looks pretty good, actually. It doesn't look like I have to fiddle with it too much. But if I did have to make adjustments to it, you could do it right here on the waveform, right? You can go, okay, right around there. So it turns out I kind of nailed it on the money, so I don't need to change it at all. So I'm just going to kind of undo, get back to just this. But if I did have to make that change, once I backed out, undo, Control Z back to where I was, my starting point here, I would then, as a whole, the waveform as a whole, make the changes here, adjusting them to whatever I needed them to be. Once I've got that set, we move forward. I'm going to zoom in and go, okay, so from here to about here, what looks to be an eighth note, right, this much, that is the attack of the kick itself. So we want to leave that in place. So I'm just going to go highlight that, drag it up. Move to the next one, drag it up. And like I said, tedious, because I'm going to do this for the whole song that involves the kick and the bass line. And we'll start with this much, just the 4 beats. So once I've got that in there, I'll zoom back in, and the next step is I'm going to take this and crossfade the 2 waveforms, paying attention to the peaks and how the curve of the waveform is where the 2 meet. I want to make sure that part's as smooth as possible and leveled out as much as possible. And once I got that, I'll go to the end, take a little curve on the end. And there it is. So there's the first little chunk. Now, by cross-fading all of those wave files, what I've done is removed any clicking artifacts that are going to happen. So this is what we've got right now. I think I missed one right here. Yeah. All right. And then I'll go through the whole track. Now this bass line is not that, it doesn't change, like it doesn't change a whole lot. It's not that complicated, so I can save myself a lot of time by doing a lot of copying and pasting. That part, right? And then I'll just kind of bind them or merge them back together. And then once they're merged, I'll go ahead and rename just to kind of signify that that part's done. And then redo my fade at the end here so that I can move that back. Now I know that this section is the same as this section, so I can save myself some time there. This part's a bit different. However, I actually want the sub bass portion to do the exact same thing in some specific areas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this much of it. Here's why, because I want up to there to be identical. Do that, give that a little fade. And the same, boom, right? And I can merge that together. Sub bass 2. And I know that the bass line at the back end is almost exactly the same. So let's just take a look here. On this one, I had it a bit different. So we're going to take this much in. There we go. Because I left that part as is, if I recall correctly. Three, is that right? Yep. Get my fade back here and bring this over. Now I didn't mess with the original kick or the ones that I have in the breakdown here. And make sure that's muted, but this is now what that sounds like with everything else. So what I've done is I have essentially mixed the sub, just the bass portion of the sub, the low end, in with the kick, not different than how I did my 808 on my first tutorial on my channel here, where I just cross-faded the sine wave with the attack of the kick, and that was to make one drum trigger, one drum hit. In this case, I have a full pattern of bass line where I've done the exact same thing. And the result is that I now no longer have to worry about the sub interfering with the attack of the kick because it's individually edited into the actual kick drum, almost as if each piece was its own unique kick utilizing or fulfilling the role of the sub bass portion. And then you just EQ out the low end of the bass line so that you don't have the two frequencies fighting each other, and then go about doing the rest of your mix down. Now, I will say that this is definitely something you want to do when you are completed with the track, where everything is mixed the way you want it to be and everything sounds the way you want it to be, because once you have finished all of this, if you start making changes to the baseline, you got to go back and do it again. Like I said, it's tedious, but it ultimately gives some super clean results. Let's give it another listen. So yeah, and there it is. If you have any additional questions on the process, drop it down in the comment section below. Give me a like, share, subscribe, and if you're looking for anything else or you're interested in anything else that I'm doing, search Originaldjhero, all one word, on Facebook, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Instagram, Twitter. You'll find me. I love chatting music. If you've got any additional questions or ideas for future videos, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, good luck with your own projects. I hope you're seeing some success, and we'll see you again soon.